Hi everybody, my name is Lynn Hayes and welcome to my channel if you're new here. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the astrology of 2021. At the beginning of 2020, when I wrote my article for the astrology for the coming year, I was pretty sure, as all astrologers were, that there was going to be something very important that was going to happen that year. We were looking ahead to the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto in the sign of Capricorn. We knew that there was going to be some kind of big restriction, that there could be some challenges to the economic system, Capricorn being associated with the structures that we build our lives on, such as businesses, schools, marriages, anything having to do with the structures of society are ruled by Capricorn. And then you have Saturn, the planet of hardship, in the sign of Capricorn, conjunct Pluto, the planet of destruction. So it was pretty clear something was going to happen. I was warning all my clients, don't make any unreasonable investments. This is not a time for speculation. But not very many people foresaw that there would be a global pandemic. Obviously, with Neptune and Pisces, there is an association with viruses and illnesses, mysterious events that seem to have no cause. So it's not completely out of the astrological realm of possibilities with this combination of planets that we would have a global pandemic that basically brings the world economy to its knees. So far in this pandemic, billionaires and millionaires seem to be doing very well, but a lot of other people are not doing so well in this COVID economy. If we look back to January, which is when Saturn and Pluto first made their conjunction, there was also a station of Uranus, the planet of radical change, as well as a lunar eclipse in the sign of Cancer, which was exactly opposite the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So looking ahead to this time between January 8th and 16th, it was pretty clear that there was going to be something momentous that would happen, and I was cautioning people just to watch it and wait. That's, of course, when we first found out that this virus was spreading throughout China, and it began to spread through other countries as well. I don't want to talk too much about the virus, although that does seem to have been the major event to affect us in the year 2020. But I think it's helpful to look back at where we've been so that we can understand a little bit better where we're going. One of the effects of the coronavirus is that it has created huge changes in the way that we work. Capricorn, of course, is associated with work as well as with business. These changes, many of them, are likely to become permanent as we move into 2021 and future years. The planetary energies that we're looking forward to in 2021 will actually help this process of change. We're going from an intensely Capricornian time of restriction, of duty, of responsibility, of compression and contraction, to Aquarius, which is a sign that embraces new ideas, innovation, new scientific discoveries. It is very involved in the experience of the collective as opposed to the experience of the individual. So we will be working with all of these themes in the coming year. The whole approach to the pandemic is likely to change as we make this shift from Capricorn into Aquarius. Capricorn is all about shutting down and constricting. Aquarius is about using technology and finding new ideas. So there's going to be new ways to manage the situation. There's going to be new inventions that help us to work. There will be, and already are, plenty of innovations as far as education, working from home, having meetings. And of course, many of us have been doing this for years. I've been working on Zoom as long as Zoom has been around. But this is new for many people that are used to going into offices and having meetings that are held in person. And all of this is likely to change. Then there's going to be the ripple effects from that in the commercial real estate field and in many different areas. Jupiter and Saturn both moved into the sign of Aquarius in December, which began the shift from Capricorn into Aquarius. Now there's a lot of layers of transition here. We have the macrocosm, which is we are somewhere in the transition point between the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius. We don't know exactly when the age of Aquarius begins, but there is a transition period between the ages. They're 2,150-year cycles, so it's not like they turn over in just 1 year. But we're definitely shifting into the age of Aquarius, where there's greater technology, there's more robotics, there's more artificial intelligence, more of a focus on community, more of a focus on social justice, less of a focus on the material world, the structures of banking and all of those things. We're seeing that already. Bitcoin, Venmo, I don't remember the last check I wrote, for example. Those are very Capricornian. All of those areas of life are changing. So we have the macrocosm. Then we have the fact that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction has just moved into air from Earth, where it was for 200 years. And I'll post a link in the description box so that you can learn more about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. One thing to note, though, as we move from Earth to air, Earth is more about doing. It's more about creating and making things that are solid. And air, which is, we're just now moving into this 200-year cycle of Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in air. Air is much more unpredictable. It's more malleable. It's more about inventions and ideas and ways to communicate. Air is also more idealistic and less practical than Earth. When we're talking about Aquarius, we are talking about a sign that has two rulers. Saturn is the traditional ruler. Uranus is the modern ruler. I personally have never thrown out Saturn as the ruler of Aquarius. Saturn is very important in explaining the sort of cold practicality of Aquarius. Aquarius is very idealistic, but it's very practical about how to achieve those ends. And that comes from the planet Saturn. Uranus is a modern planet. It's a transformational planet. It inspires us to break out of routines, to break out of ruts that aren't serving us anymore. When you combine these two planets, Saturn, the old, Uranus, the new, into one, you have a sign that is very much involved in paradigm shifting. But there can also be a lot of judgment about which paradigm to choose. You know, anytime we have Saturn, there's going to be some judgment and there's going to be a tendency towards some negativity. So the fact that we're moving into this Aquarius period doesn't necessarily mean that the party is starting. Hopefully there will be a lot more air and a lot more space, but I believe that there could be a bit of a challenge in getting to that. There's going to be a lot of arguments about what to let go of as society continues to shift. Change is very difficult for some people. Some people just embrace it, but for some, it's very hard and it can be very frightening. That's the kind of cycle that we're in right now with this big shift into Aquarius. So we're dealing with Saturn and Uranus, and we also have Jupiter this year. When we're looking at the mythology of the rulers of Aquarius, and also with Jupiter, who is involved because Jupiter is lining up with Saturn and squaring Uranus. The mythology of these gods is very interesting as we consider our world today. In ancient Greece, the primordial goddess was called Gaia. When the Greek religion came into being, Gaia became the wife of Uranus in Greece, who was the sky god. And I love this image of Uranus as the sky god with the big perspective, the broad perspective, impersonal, transpersonal, really able to see the bigger picture. So Uranus and Gaia came together and they had many children, as they did in those days. And Saturn, or Kronos, was one of those children. Saturn actually castrated his father Uranus and threw his genitals into the sea, from which Venus arose. But that's another story for another time. In any case, the castration of Uranus by Saturn in our mythology for today represents the overthrow by Saturn, representing the material world, of Uranus representing ideas and innovation and a bigger picture. And then in turn, Saturn had a son called Jupiter, or Zeus in ancient Greece, and Jupiter/Zeus overthrew Saturn. And in astrology, Jupiter has become associated with expansion and optimism and confidence. So whenever we have a combination of Jupiter and Saturn, as we did in December when those two came together, there's a melding of optimism and openness and belief, which is Jupiter, with restriction and discipline and hard work, which is Saturn. So we start with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in December. All through 2021, Saturn is going to be in a challenging square to Uranus. Saturn in Aquarius, which is ruled by both Saturn and Uranus, And a square to Uranus is either a double or triple whammy of Saturn and Uranus combinations. This is so symbolic of the letting go of the old, which is Saturn, and the embrace and excitement of the new, which is Uranus. We can either make this an exciting time of change and of revelation and revolution in our personal lives, or we can weep over what is past and fear the future. I feel like it's that clear cut. Now, globally, there's likely to be a great deal of civil unrest, especially in areas where there's been a lot of social injustice, where there's been economic injustice, where there's been racial injustice. Because Aquarius is all about equalizing. It's about creating ideals that are for the collective, not necessarily at the personal level. One interesting thing that we have happening in the first half of 2021 is we have a long period where there are no planets retrograde. You might remember last year, if you watched any of my videos or follow other astrologers, we had a very long period where there were between 5 and 7 retrograde planets. Every planet that could turn retrograde was retrograde. The last of those planets that were retrograde in 2020 turns direct on January 14, 2021, and I'm speaking of Uranus. Then there's a 2-week period where there's no planets retrograde, and then Mercury turns retrograde on January 30th. But after Mercury turns direct on February 21st, there are no planets retrograde until April 27th. That's a 2-month period with no retrograde planets. When there are no retrograde planets, life moves very quickly, which I think is going to be very helpful as we move through 2021. We're not going to have all those retrograde planets pulling us back. There's going to be a great deal of progress, I believe. It'll be a lot easier to make progress as far as putting our lives back into something approaching normal, understanding that we will never go back to the old normal. We're building and creating a new normal now. In the spring and summer, Jupiter, which moved into Aquarius in December, is going to move all the way through Aquarius and slip into Pisces for about 3 months. When Jupiter is in Pisces, which is the sign that involves mysteries and does have a lot to do with viruses and with illnesses that are confusing and mysterious. When Jupiter goes into Pisces for those 3 months, I believe it's possible that we may have an acceleration of the virus. I know on YouTube you're not supposed to talk about the virus. They demonetize you or they don't promote you or something. But we can't really talk about astrology really without talking about the virus. So this period between May, June, and July, I think we might see some slippage. I do believe that during this period with no retrogrades, there will be a lot of progress and a lot of forward motion. Jupiter going into Pisces could add another layer of mystery. We do have some very good news, though, with Saturn and Chiron. Chiron is a small planet, but it packs a big punch, especially when we're talking about healing and illness and any kind of real transformational experience. And throughout much of the year, Saturn is going to be in a harmonious aspect to Chiron. When Saturn interacts harmoniously with Chiron, it helps to deepen our understanding. When this happens in our personal lives, there tends to be a much faster integration of any kind of healing or personal transformational work that we're doing. So I feel very optimistic that with Saturn in a sextile to Chiron this year, we will begin to learn a lot more about how to interact with the planet in a way that would hopefully minimize future pandemics. As the world gets smaller and the population continues to increase, mass farming of animals creates living situations for these animals that breed disease, which makes it much easier for those diseases to hop onto humans. It's going to be more and more important to understand and to be able to put in place a logical system for fighting these sorts of viruses. It's possible that viruses could be the major enemy that we face as humans over the next 20 years. And a logical approach is what we can expect under the influence of Aquarius. And I think the Saturn-Chiron aspect will really help us to achieve that. The last thing I want to mention before I conclude this little talk is that Pluto, the planet of destruction and regeneration, is in a challenging square to the new planet Eris. Eris is considered a dwarf planet, but I believe that it could be very important, especially as world events are concerned. It moves too slowly to really be of much use in natal astrology, the astrology of individual personalities. But I think as far as global events go, as we see planets make aspects to Eris in the sky, we've seen some really big changes occur. Just to recap the mythology of Eris, Eris was the one who was not invited to the wedding, and she was mad, and so she threw a golden apple into the wedding that said, "For the fairest." And then they proceeded to have a contest about who was the most beautiful, which you can just imagine how that ended up. And in fact, it ended up in the Trojan War. The symbolism of Eris, therefore, to me, represents a small, seemingly insignificant event that creates a big crisis. Last year, Pluto began a challenging square to Eris, and before that, we had Uranus transiting over the planet Eris between 2015 and 2017. I probably don't have to remind you what happened in the middle of that. We had a very unexpected result to a presidential election in the United States. And with Pluto in a square to Eris starting in 2020 and going through 2022, there has been a great deal of conflict. Pluto, the planet of destruction, Eris, the goddess of discord, sort of turning things upside down. We have crazy conspiracy theories. I've never seen anything like it in all my life. And so it's a very interesting time that we're living in. And the square between Pluto and Eris will continue at least through this year and into 2022. So that does suggest that there is going to be some disruption. It's not like, oh, that's the past, now we're moving into the future. But if we look at this from a positive perspective and keep in mind that the universe is always striving for balance, that as these changes occur, we can move forward into a more enlightened future. So I think that's probably a good place to end this video. Thanks for sticking around till the end. And if you're new here, I invite you to join me every Monday morning where I post a video for the astrology of the week. Thanks again. I hope you have a fantastic year.